You're here on time. Apologies, Peter McCabe has to, he's actually covering a joint health scrutiny meeting. Yeah, yes. So welcome to Councillor Ben Butler, substituting for him, and John DeHagley, apologies, and welcome to Councillor David Jones, who's substituting. Joan Henry, we have apologies for lateness, good to see him, and also apologies from Emma Levin and Cotton Powell. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interest? I don't. Okay, the minutes of the previous meeting on 26, an accurate record, can I take that? Any points arising? Okay, thank you. Right, well the substantial item tonight is our opportunity to hear from and question the leader and chief executive on our priorities and challenges for the year ahead. And for you to decide who's going to vote first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the work that you do on scrutiny and for all the task forces, the task groups, the policy working groups that you set up throughout the year. They add immensely to the progress that this council is making on behalf of residents, and the checks and balances that you provide are very, very important to any local authority in any part of this country. But we do here in Merton appreciate the work of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. What I wanted to do was just to set the scene in terms of the difficulties faced by local authorities, not just here but throughout the country, and despite those difficulties, just go through some of the policies we've put in place that benefit residents of this borough, and then particularly, no doubt any questions, I'll be able to look at the priorities and the ambitions that we have for our residents. So we're all aware that cuts have happened to all local authorities to a percentage of up to 50% since 2010. And whilst we were pleased to have been in a position to freeze the council tax to help those on low pay and those that are worse off, we did that for around 7 years. In the last 2 years, we have and we will in the future take the permitted increase by the government and be mindful of the monies we need to allocate to adult social care in particular. Now, we have planned our expenditure quite carefully, and we've kept all our children's centres open. We opened a new centre for adults with learning disabilities in Nathan Road, and also keen to exempt care leavers from the council tax. We're doing that up to the age of 25. Council tax rebates continue to be applied to those on low incomes, and we're one of the few local authorities that have done that since the inception of council tax support being handed over to local authorities by the then coalition. Really pleased that our award-winning libraries are all open. We opened a brand new one, as you're aware, that is a dementia-friendly one in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Society. And we're opening a brand new secondary school to address our secondary school strategy and demand for secondary school places in South Wimbledon. We know that the parents are very much looking forward to the opening of that school in September 2020. We're very keen that we continue to ensure that our schools are good or outstanding. We prefer them to be outstanding, but all our secondary schools are good or outstanding. We need to work more on our primary schools. Some are facing some difficulties, but most of our primary schools are also good or outstanding. We continue to receive plaudits for our children's services, despite the difficulties in terms of sums of money, and we're allocating what we can to adult social care. And the challenges for this local authority is housing. We've got a huge target handed down to us from City Hall, 1,328 per year up to for over 10 years. That's a 200% increase on the previous targets, and we'll do what we can by working closely on AFC Wimbledon's developments. That should produce 800 units. Clarion's regeneration of our 3 estates, the Morden regeneration town centre, Modes working on Pollard's Hill, and the new Morden, I think it's the Tesco. And we're keen that we should be able to achieve units in the region of 6,000 over 10 years, but certainly not the 11,000, 12,000 targets. So but we'll do our level best. We've also set up Grantham. We're not a local authority property company. We're not alone in that, and we're working closely to bring forward 77 units for private rent and for sale, and hopefully to be able to on-sale some to registered providers as affordable. And those are in Elm Nursery, Raleigh Gardens, and Canners Place and Farm Road. I'm really pleased that this local authority, despite all the difficulties, has been in a position to offer unaccompanied asylum-seeking children 50 places over the next 10 years, and very, very pleased with the passion of our Director of Children's Services and Cabinet Member for Children's Services in putting that in place. There are issues throughout the borough, throughout London, with the private rented sector. We are in a position now in terms of prosecuting bad landlords, but also in terms of providing a better deal for private renters. We do help private renters. We've come to the aid of about 1,250 in terms of issues that they've raised with us, but we're now in the midst of creating a landlord licensing scheme that should come forward and provide some comfort to those in private rented sector accommodation. I think I'll leave it there, apart from just reminding us all about our Brexit task group and its function to be in a position to advise, cajole directors and our services to be in a position to help our European residents as we may confront a Brexit with no deal, and we're talking to all local authorities to exchange good practice to see how we can continue to help. We're also wanting to look over and take a stronger view with regard to ID Verdi and Veolia. We have introduced those 2 commissioned services, outsourced them. We did introduce a standard service. We're hoping to move towards addressing residents' concerns, but I can say that recycling is on the up and landfill is on the way down. And those are big, bold achievements, but we're fully aware of the need to continue to address the particular issues raised by residents, both with our parks and open spaces and with the contract with Veolia. I'll leave it there. I'm very happy to take questions along with the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we'll ask Gary to go on figures, and then we'll take this.
Well, I'll start as the leader did by thanking you all for giving us the opportunity to address you and to try and answer any questions that you might have. I suppose I'd start with what I see as the strategic issues facing the authority, which are principally that we lack the resources necessary to meet all of the needs which we discover on a daily basis, which our residents bring to us, and we are constantly trying to find the most economic and effective way of delivering services with resources which are simply inadequate to the task. So over a period of time, we've seen a steady diminution of the council's ability to respond effectively to many things that it wants to do. We are trying to tackle that by making appropriate decisions, reducing the costs that we incur, increasing the income that we generate, and by trying to help the community be stronger itself and more able to, in a kind of self-reliant way, solve many of the problems which might otherwise be immediately to the authority to tackle. That latter task is easy to say and quite hard to deliver. places quite a lot of demands on the council to help encourage and develop communities' ability to work together. We've done a piece of work recently working with Southern Council actually within the St Helier ward, trying to work with the local community to think about what resources there are there to help the community think about its own needs and to lead and develop and respond to those issues, working alongside both the councils, not just relying on the council to provide help. I suspect that's a model which we might have to develop further if resources don't increase in the medium term. There's no short-term likelihood that we will see an increase in funding. When we spoke last year, we were aware that we were due to have had a spending review by now, which will give us a 3-year funding settlement, and there was also supposed to be a fair funding review that would have been completed by now, which would have looked at how resources within local government are shared across the country. Now, both of those have not been delivered. They've been caught up with the government being involved and focusing on other issues, so that hasn't happened yet. The most likely outcome, I think, is that we will get a 1-year spending settlement with a commitment to try and provide something subsequently. That's quite difficult for us, because it makes it very difficult for us to make any commitments beyond the first year. And indeed, as we currently operate, quite a lot of our money comes attached to specific programs, like the Troubled Families programs and those sorts of things. We have to recruit staff and employ staff for those. If we only know a year's funding in advance, it's very, very difficult to sustain that. So that is going to be a challenge. Being slightly more optimistic, the current leadership campaign, every single morning I woke up to a further offer of money that's coming our way, so that may come to pass. At the moment there's quite a lot of resources that are going to come towards us, either to pay staff more money or to actually help deliver some of these services. So we'll have to travel hopefully in relation to some of that. The challenge in terms of having robust and strong local communities, I think also opens up a conversation which we might want to have as officers with you as councillors. Because there is a model that we could pursue that actually sees councillors as central to that. Councillors are in a position to know their communities often better than officers will. You have much more engagement with communities. And you could actually be assisted by the council to be even better informed and more engaged with communities, acting to encourage them to participate in whatever things are taking place in the borough. Lots of residents have got no idea about the number of entrepreneurs that are actually in their area or what they could become involved in. And a role of signposting and connecting people is something that has been suggested in some quarters that councillors are very well able to deliver. It's quite a task. It takes quite a lot of time, and it's quite hard for people to balance out everything else they're doing. But it may be something, if there's an appetite for it, that it's not further developed a couple of years. So those strike me as the 2 strategic issues: how we cope with less money and how we help communities be more self-reliant. The leader covered almost all of the issues that I was going to pick up on. Just a couple that I was going to mention, if that's all right, Chair, before we throw it open. Children, schools and families, we have a particular pressure point in relation to education, healthcare and care plans. That is a real issue, particularly in South West London, but we're experiencing it here. We're in a position where demand is far outstripping our capacity to respond to it. We have a situation where the schools in particular are telling us that they've got more and more children who need help and assistance. We're spending way beyond our budgetary provision at the moment for it, and we need to find some solutions to that issue. So it's going to be a continuing area of inquiry, I think, over the next 12 months. Health, we've made significant progress over the last 12 months working through the Health and Wellbeing Board. We have much better practical plans now in place to see an integration of health and social care at the local borough level. We've got very strong working relationships now with the CCG, and I think that's going to certainly improve the quality of experience of care that our residents will see. It will seem much more seamless than it does at the moment, and it holds out the possibility we could actually do that in a more economic way, but we have to prove that second part of the proposition. That is a possibility there. And then finally, I would say we are trying to do all we can in responding to residents' very real concerns about air quality and about the environment. There's a danger that we end up with a binary conversation that seems to place the council at odds with the motorists. We need to find a way of having a dialogue that isn't a binary conflict, but a way that actually explains what the issues are. People who drive cars also breathe air, and there must be some way we can open a conversation that allows people to understand the issues that we're trying to tackle. We need to signal as an authority that we understand the difficulties and challenges that people face with hybrid cars and people. But equally, we can't stand idly by and see what's happening to our air quality continually. We have some way of looking at that conversation. We're taking steps on air quality. I'm not convinced we've been as efficient as we could be as an officer call, or people will be engaged in communicating about that with motorists. So it's a challenge this time. That's what we're doing.
Thank you. What I'm going to suggest now is that I want everyone to have an opportunity to ask a question and then leave us up in the King Young, Councillor Brennan.
Yes, that's very kind. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much, Leader, for attending tonight. And I wanted to ask a question about the resources, and in particular the efficient management of those resources. As a new councillor, one thing I know other councillors try to do, we started with, look at the different departments and see how much we can get out of them in terms of what they can deliver in terms of good outcomes and working successfully. And one thing I noticed in dealing with everyday council queries was I looked at the org charts of, in a department, for example, there are I think 526 people in the children and young persons department, and I wanted to understand who was who, and if we wanted something doing, how we could get to do it. And I noticed our org charts as a council are very, very out of date, and that doesn't just impact councillors, but it impacts the officers on an everyday basis. They cross-refer to 2015, and if you look at the names in the org charts, some of them are several years out of date. I'm sure you're aware of the issue. Could we have a commitment so we can, look at the Sustainable Communities Department? I know the headcount there, for example, was 306, and last year it's got to 373 this year. We just want to know what those people are doing, how we can make the most of those resources. So would you be able to, I know you acknowledge that they are out of date, they could do with a bit of a rewrite and maybe provide a timetable just to make sure that the resources we have in any corporate organisation or business has to have that as a starting point, and if you don't have that, nobody knows how to get anything done, basically.
Well, I'll leave that to the head of paid service.
I was going to say, that is definitely for me. Yes, it is a problem that we've got. They haven't been updated as they should be, and I'm very happy to give that commitment that we will produce more research charts, and then flowing on from that, produce several things.
Do you want to come back on that?
Well, one supplementary, if I may, that's it. I think. And then this is very helpful having this sort of corporate input. Would it be possible, I know lots of scrutiny committees have it, would it be possible to have at every overview scrutiny commission meeting, if not our leader, perhaps the deputy leader, Councillor Allison, so we can ask him some corporate style questions, or maybe he wants to give us an update at the beginning of it, rather than once a year. Would it be possible to have Councillor Allison as the deputy leader giving a quick update on important matters, so our councillors here can hear from him as to what's live at the time? Would you commit to that?
Yeah, that's what
If I could comment on that, because at present, Councillor Elson does attend every time we are scrutinising the budget, so that's 2 meetings a year. I don't see why we couldn't extend that to, particularly the first of those 2 meetings, there would be scope to raise other questions.
I think you have got an item on your agenda when Steve and I have gone about how you run your business. That's entirely up to you. It's not for us to say whether you can or can't make a request. Obviously, we have to then decide, the member has to say whether they wish to respond to that request. The only thing I would caution is that In my experience, scrutiny has far more work to do than it has the time in which to do it. And an agenda item that's just open-ended and somebody comes along and it becomes discursive, it can take up far more time than you can actually manage very effectively. So I would just suggest that you're a bit more regarding that one, so reflect about it.
I will certainly have a word with Councillor Allison, mindful of what Jen has said, sort of as between Councillor Allison and myself, but I do believe that you need to be targeted in many respects on the business of the meeting. But if I'm covering this meeting, Councillor Allison is covering another 2 meetings, we'll see what we can do with the other meetings. But you may want to mark on what the Chief Executive said.
Yes, Julia just reminds me about our remit apart from budget is the safer and stronger thing, so we would need to stick to that. I'm going to take Sally next.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. My question is linked to, due to national funding cuts to Merton, which is affecting other councils, how are you managing to cover residents' needs and raise money from other avenues, and linking that particularly to the 77 units of private housing, the one share system you got, which once built would generate income, but the comment you said, Stephen, about for rent and for sale, and my concern is rent will give us ongoing income, whereas sale, it's once and no longer. So that is one way of funding our budget. What other ways, initiatives have you got?
Yes,
Thank
so
you.
just clarify on the Moranton company.
Yes.
To do with sense of properties, the main thinking around that is for private rented, so it produces revenue stream for the local authority. That's primarily. But if it's a success and that's going well, what we want to do is to be able to turn some of those, if it's a successful stream of revenues, some of those by a few of them, not all of them, but after a time, not straight away, by possible sale to a registered provider. But the initial thinking is to provide revenue stream for the local authority.
Do you want to come back to that?
Yes, please. So that would deplete our stock if you eventually sell some off, instead of keeping the stock to keep generating money, and if you use some for budget and manage it to perhaps build more in the future.
Can I just say I'm talking about a few, 3 or 4 or 5. So the vast majority will be for private rented, to make a success of the project, so it funds itself. But I'm talking if after 5 or 10 years we decide to sell 1 or 2 or 3 or very, very few, a small tiny amount, to lock them in as affordable for residents via a registered provider. So a few, a tiny few, after a number of years. But the vast majority will be to create revenue stream for the local authority.
Thank you. And Chair, could I ask for the other part of my question to be answered?
Okay.
What other avenues, and I don't know if Jen can come in, are there you are looking at for generating future income?
So we have income targets actually for most of the departments. So almost all departments are examining potential and possibility of raising income. The contracts that we let require the contractors to supplement their resources through income. So the ideal early contract, for example, requires them to supplement what they get through things that they manage to operate through the parks. We have an extremely successful company, Chaz, which I suspect most of us are now aware of, which provides licensing for private contractors in terms of health and safety accreditation, which generates several £1 million for the authority on an annual basis. We are probably more risk aware than members sometimes would like us to be about these issues. There has in fact in the past been a scrutiny review about commercialisation It was encouraging the authority to be a little braver in going to the market and pointing out that a number of councils at that point were saying that they could generate very significant sums. That hasn't actually come to pass, and almost all of those authorities that avoided making difficult financial decisions and instead said we would be able to sell our services to all those authorities have actually found that those markets people weren't prepared to buy. Because actually in most areas, unless you can show that you have got some unique selling point, you actually are the market leader in that area, people are not going to buy your services. And all the wishing in the world that's going to happen doesn't result in action by your services. So we have been careful to really only say we will put into the budget an income figure that we know we can generate. Now I suspect we probably do it slightly too much on the caution side, but the consequences of getting it wrong are quite significant. We're going to see, if you start looking at the budgets, a lot more turbulence than we've had in the past. In the past, our budgets worked on receiving a block grant, essentially, that was largely aligned with the demand that we would face, so that's relatively easy to manage. Since that grant has gone away, we now face fluctuating and variable demand and fluctuating and variable income on a yearly basis as a commercial body will find as well. So we're going to find each year that our outturn will either be below the line or above the line, and that's going to happen year after year after year. We're going to have to carry fairly substantial reserves to allow us to smooth our way through, unless and until our financial system changes.
Just add to that, someone with a business background, I studied Kent County Council very closely. They're one of the councils that has a big element of transactions with the business sector. So they would be engaging with residents and selling them services, print services, MOT services and so on. And that has put them in competition with other local businesses who pay their business rates to them. So I did look at that closely. It wasn't working as well as I thought it was. It was having a clash between the local authority and the businesses, because if you do create a business revenue stream, it is a business that may be something that a normal commercial business also will see in competition. Having said that, we are seeing an increase in our business rate income. So one of the ways we can, although we don't keep all our business rates, there are proposals to pool the business rates of all local authorities and allow us to keep a lot more of it. But we are seeing our business rate income going up. Maybe that if we're an attractive business proposition for businesses, they come to the borough and take up our spaces. Perhaps that is a way forward, especially in industrial estates that are fully let and very, very busy at the moment. Where we did, and we'll continue to see whether we can create an income stream, and that is to sweat out our assets like parks, for example, and we'll be fully aware of this in terms of Morden Park and music festivals. Again, that brings us into a clash with residents. So yes, I firmly believe I'm trying to be a bit more risky with these things, but you have to tread warily in terms of clashes not only with your residents as you create more economic activity, whether it's in the nighttime economy or whether it's in your parks, or whether you create more economic activity as the local authority being the entrepreneur and clashing with other businesses that pay business rates to you. But we will continue to do all we can to create more income. But the best way to move forward is for the government of the day to acknowledge the difficulties of local authorities, especially in funding adult social care.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow immediately on to that one if I can, Stephen. I agree with you, crowding out businesses is the last thing that we want to do. However, in the east of the borough, one would argue that we have a paucity of businesses, actually, especially within the sort of the town centres, which are like, 5 betting shops, 7 takeaways, 3 bars, whatever it is. Now, when you look at the success of, the recently regenerated strip just off Common Lane here, and enabling businesses to actually come in there in a way doing commercial regeneration, and both then as the property owner taking money from the leases. So you don't own the, I'm not suggesting that you actually own the kebab shop, but actually you regenerate a strip that in a way be specific in a way that will enable the type of business that you want in that strip, as because you're actually the owner, as opposed to through planning we can't dictate which type of shops go in there. You know, you have a virtuous cycle, because suddenly you have footfall. You're in those areas, you don't have the antisocial behaviour, you have a different type, and as that footfall increases, so does the value of the property that you own. So specifically with regards to that model, why aren't we seeing that in the east of the borough, in areas like Merton Town Centre, where we can both succeed in regenerating, encouraging small community-owned businesses, and increasing the long-term rent? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is, and you're quite right in terms of that is a prime area to encourage a business take-up, and if the local authority is the owner and has the ability to lease out, it can be a maker of the place. So in investing of around £7 million in the Rediscover Mitcham project, I think that is the starting blocks for moving on to the kind of thing that you have commented on. We have tried desperately hard to get a major developer interested in investing in Mitcham Town Centre, but I think what you're referring to is something the local authority can kick off because of its ability to be in control of premises. So I'm mindful of what happens in areas such as Clapham, near Clapham Junction, where I do know that the local authority there has played a kind of god, i.e. has determined the type of business it wants there that would attract young families, would be a haven for coffee, but next door would be an ability for the children to play or to engage in creative activity. So there's a reason for going there. And so, yes, we do need to be more practical and more on hands.
Building on this, and I have spoken to you previously about the difficulty in attracting investors into Mitcham Town Centre, so I know it's there. But I also know that in places like Croydon, Legal & General are working with and using a proportion of their pension fund as well to both service the pension fund growth as is necessary. I'm the primary responsibility and the chair of the pension, I get that. But actually it's a source of capital. That means that we don't have to rely on external investors. We can actually build, we can use what capital we have, what finances we have, and achieve many things then. The returns that we need for our pension funds, the regeneration that we need for our communities, and the revenue generation that we need to offset our services. So my question is are we looking at using our capital rather than relying on external investors to facilitate the type of investment? I don't like the idea of playing God, but to placemake, I think, is a better way of saying it.
I think we have a meeting with Legal & General lined up to see how they operate and what they do. Whether we have the wherewithal to use our own capital, we can certainly look at that. I think it's important that we're open to ideas and to explorations around that. If that is working elsewhere, then I think we should look at that.
So, I'm in danger of spending the evening finding the cloud to every silver lining that emerges, but I would say that a significant amount of work was done quite a while ago now, if I'm absolutely honest, probably about 2007, 8, 9, looking at how we could best help the development of Mitcham. And all of the studies at that time identified what was required was an intensification of housing occupancy right in the centre of Mitcham, followed by a much better public transport network other than just the buses, ideally some link to the tube, which is even having Eastway as a train station is just the wrong place really for driving what we want. Much better than not having it, but it's not in an ideal location. Without the housing intensification, all the advice we've had whenever we've approached the private sector before, and we're going to continue trying to do it, but without that level of occupancy, it's going to be incredibly difficult to persuade somebody to put the very significant amount of money that's going to be necessary. It's the same model as we're about to try and land just outside this building in Morden. We're going to have something on a similar sort of level of development before we can make the progress that we need.
100% agree, and that centre of land mass, when you look at other places that have faced similar problems with footfall, they've either done it through a major office, or what they've done is rent out short-term leases to key workers. We've got a major hospital nearby in Georgia, we target specifically nurses, and it's a new generation, it's not quite the same housing market, but actually it creates both the footfall you need in those kind of areas and in itself the revenue generation. But it's the kicking off of this, where does that money come from? And, I understand why people don't want to invest here, so let's do it ourselves at the point I'm making. Let's look at what we've got and stop relying on externals to come in.
So I don't get stuck on this, but then we're going to probably have to do a lot of work with the local community though, because the reality is, to get the amount of occupancy that we're talking about, you're going to have to be reasonably high there. And whenever we've taken those kind of master planning exercises to residents in Mitcham, there's still a very significant number of people in Mitcham who still think of it as a sorry village and will not support the planning application to move higher unless we can start a conversation with people that properly explains all the benefits that flow from it as well. And that's a piece of work we have.
And we'll talk about comms if I get another question, I'm sure.
I'm going to follow on that though, but, because something I didn't know until tonight was that we are now looking at a target of 6,000 homes over 10 years. That's a 50% uplift on what we are doing now, 411 homes, isn't that? Once that's in our policies, then a degree of intensification that may not have been acceptable in 2007-8 becomes inevitable, doesn't it? So, yes, I know we have in every ward, I'm sure, areas that people would like to cherish as a village of yesteryear, but it ain't reality, is it?
No, we have to be bold. We have, and that 6,000 is nowhere near the target presented to us by City Hall. So we have to be bold. We have to be courageous, and we have to have a discussion and a conversation with residents who may feel displaced or may feel threatened by developments near them. But as I said, in terms of developments that are currently on the stocks, AFC Wimbledon 800, Clarion Regeneration, the current social housing that they have, plus 1,000 added, Morden Regeneration, 1,800 new units, Mode Pollards, 400 to 500 there, and you have the new Morden development, which is just snugged inside the borough, I think that's Tesco. So there's a few there. Morantum adds a modest amount for us to get that company going. But we do have to be bold and ambitious with regard to housing and engage with residents.
I would like to get to the...
Use your mic, Philip. Partly for the benefit of Merton.TV,
Okay.
we welcome in the
Go back
interest
to
of
the regeneration of in particular Morden. Can we then update the wheel now with particular negotiations with TfL, etc.?
Yes, so this is something that was kicked off under a previous leader from within your administration between 2006 and 2010, but as you know, 2008 there was a dip in the market, and there was no appetite for what was then termed more Morden. Since then, officers in Future Merton worked really hard to engage both with residents, with the business community and with developers. And so we feel that by the end of this year, our discussions with TfL, who are one side of the ownership, and ourselves as the local authority, that we should be in a position to kick off the procurement of a major developer at the end of this year, and to see something beginning to happen in 2021. We do need to get going with this. We need to offer a better shopping offer to residents, and I think there is an appetite for the regeneration of Morden Town Centre. We put out a teaser through the street referred to by Councillor Pritchard on Morden Court Parade, and we want to carry on. Now, you may think that it's simple because there are two major landowners, TfL and the local authority. TfL can be immensely bureaucratic, but we've got a good relationship with them. They're keen and we're keen, and so we need to engage with residents and win back their trust that something will happen. So the talk of the town amongst residents is not a concern or worry about what is going to happen. What they're worried about is will it happen? And so I think there is a cross-party consensus that the regeneration of Morden is a long time coming, but I know that Future Merton officers are working very, very hard. They had a consultation with residents dotted around Morden Town Centre in terms of a discussion with those who are out and about in Morden Town Centre, and it is a very appealing regeneration. I think it has the support of the Mayor of London and of TfL, and we should be in a position to start the procurement for the developer, and for that developer to be in place by the end of this year.
Thank you. Given the problems you're facing, the strategic problems, be it a hard Brexit or Brexit of some form, and of course the continuing problems with central government funding, are all our problems, not just your problems, of course. And no matter what your political hue, at a local level, most of the solutions, I suspect, are not party political. To what extent do you think we can, or do you think there is more opportunity for us to work cross-party on some of these solutions and across community? Both of you made references to bringing communities, sharing the solutions, sharing the problem. To what extent can we go further than we've thus far gone?
Well, we're beginning, and we have a good start on the 10th of July with the cross-party motion on climate emergency. I think that's an excellent start. We have previously had cross-party consensus. In 2012, all the parties agreed that it was time for a football club called AFC Wimbledon to come back to the borough. That agreement didn't state where in the borough or what kind of planning application. That's left to the planning process. But the support of all the parties together that the club should be back in Merton was a pinnacle in making that a success. And there have been many other points of consensus. So yes, I certainly approve of cross-party motions and cross-party working, and I hope that the motion on the 10th of July on moving to carbon neutral local authority, engaging with the City of London and with the government to move that way by 2050, if not by 2030, then that is a start. And we would look at all opportunities to work together, certainly.
You've agreed it's a good idea. We've agreed it's worked in the past. What I'm looking for is where we can structurally change things to make it happen more often. Perhaps, what are your views on how scrutiny might develop, for example, given that's been looked at? I'd like to see how yes, we know it works sometimes. It's happened in an ad hoc way, often for political reasons. How can we change the way we work to actually, we have the theatre, obviously, the council meeting, but outside the theatre, the council meeting, how can we use the combined strength of 60 councillors to work forward on the many non-particle issues that shouldn't divide us, and we should join together and find a solution? Are there structural things we could do? I'd like to hear Jed's view as well on that.
Okay.
Minefield.
Yes, there are things that could be done. You do have the theatre of council meeting, but the hard truth is that each of you gets to sit around this table and to play because someone is elected you. And rarely have they elected individuals, they've elected party labels. So as long as you have to be elected as a party, that will always cast quite a long shadow over the aspirations of one. Can't we just say this aside? And that's the challenge, really, I think, which we ignore at our peril. You can see that the public is sort of shifting away from some of that. So quite a lot of district councils now in Surrey are run by ratepayer groupings rather than party groupings. And you probably have to be in that sort of arrangement before you can get to a very comprehensive structural change in how a council works. It has to be an elected body. You are not elected based on party, but because of a general sense of being connected to the against. We're going to be quite a long way from that, I think, as a borough. We are.
I'm not looking for that solution.
But without that solution,
You've got out radical.
without that solution, you're always going to have in the back of your mind that at some point you've got to present yourselves to the electorate, and that will influence how people work. And the space for collaborative action is narrower than you might on first principles think because of that level.
Just add that, yes, I do believe in working together. That is important. And we have had examples. We need to build on those examples. As to whether we need to build structures so that we work more in a more collegiate way, that is for actually the council to decide about our structures. But I do believe that as a local authority, that we do not present a tribal picture to our residents. We have our differences, as Jenna said, as I always intimate, in the glare of the council meeting with bribes and not accusations, but sometimes saying things that are highly politicised. But when I find I'm talking to audiences and I politicise my speech, they don't like it. I do acknowledge that, and so residents want us to work in their interests, and we will, and where we can get together and work in their interests, we will continue to do that.
David.
Thank you, Chair. This is a simple question, and it varies away from discussions that we've had so far, based on issues of business and strategies. It's a simple question. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, and I'm looking for a straightforward, simple, honest answer. Yes, we are in a climate where there is less money around. Everything else being equal, that means that everybody's going to have to experience less. There's some groups in our community, where if that actually operates that way, they fall off. They will fall off the top of the table. So the question basically is this: let us first acknowledge the reality of that. There are groups, and not mention them specifically, that are actually suffering right now serious disadvantage. I know that because I've actually experienced some examples of it. Right? That's the reality. Now, what are we going to do in trying to square the circle so that those groups are actually supported in such a way that they don't fall off the table? What are we going to do? Because this has been going on for years, and every year it gets worse.
Well, Councillor Jewell, we have been doing this since 2011. If you recall, together we enunciated the July principles that we as a local authority would have to engage, sadly, with the programme of cuts that all local authorities have had to engage with, but that we would do all we could to ensure that where there had to be cuts, that the cuts and to those services that affected vulnerable people, be they children, be they adult social care, those would be much, much less than environment departments and corporate services budgets. So we have been doing that, and we have invested £9 million extra in adult social care. Our children's services have been deemed to be top 10 in the country, but there is much, much more we can do. But that we as a local authority, in terms of the exemption of care leavers from council tax, in terms of the council tax support for those on low in work but on low pay, we as a local authority have been doing that. But there is so much more as we take cognizance of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and their latest report that local authorities are going to struggle to meet their statutory obligations to adult social care, to the most vulnerable. So as we grapple with that, there may have to be more cuts and savings, again in environment, in corporate services, as we go towards preferring support for adult social care. But we have to lobby central government, and we have to engage with the independent research by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, work through the LGA to make sure that there is income and money's coming to pay for adult social care. And the Institute of Fiscal Studies said that even with the permitted increases in council tax that all local authorities are allowed to bring in, that still won't be enough. There will be an £8 billion gap in adult social care throughout the UK. But we as a local authority are mindful that those unseen services, children's services, adult social, that are not viewable, that they will continue to be supported by this local authority. But there's much more we can do.
I fully accept the arguments that you are presenting, but given the reality on the ground, I think this is just my suggestion. I think that sometimes we have to be bold, and we have to do things that are actually not expected of us, and that we are going to be criticized, and maybe we might even suffer politically by it. But I do believe, given the state of play at the moment, that somebody's got to be bold enough to stick their neck out and take the necessary action to address the concerns that. And I said I didn't mention the groups. You have actually pointed out some of the groups, but the group that I was specifically talking about here, specifically are the disabled members. Go down in among the community and you see for yourself the hardships, and you could even say in some instances the suffering that is being experienced. We have, what do we have to do to try and bring some sanity to these proceedings? And I'm not saying this out of any emotion. I'm saying this out of reality. This is my experience of what's going on down there on the ground. So maybe we don't have solutions. The least we can do is then just be bold enough to accept that this is the reality, this is the problem, but we actually don't have any way of dealing with it. I think people would be actually much more content if we actually made that position, rather than to carry on talking about things, and it doesn't seem as if they're actually having any benefits.
I don't agree with not talking about the issue or giving up or stopping striving to help people. As the Council will be aware, I was a Disability Rights Commissioner that set up the Disability Rights Commission and moved towards the parts 1, 2 and 3, access to goods and services and the reasonable adjustment case for disabled people. We have, for those with learning disabilities, opened the brand new Lake Road Day Centre in Abbey Ward, and I know where the Council is coming from, and we must continue to do all we can to help disabled people within this community, within this borough. But again, I have to say, it is something that we need to engage with government as well in terms of more resources and how that community is assessed for the purposes of help and assistance.
Yes, just very quickly, Councillor Chung is absolutely right. There is a level of distress and unmet need in the community which is unconscionable, and none of us would want to be in the position that we are in. And officers working for you on a daily basis are having to see people who have real needs which are simply unable to support or meet currently. I would urge some caution, though I understand why you say we should just take bold actions and take the consequences. Not necessarily in such a planned way, but Northamptonshire didn't make any of the budget reductions they were supposed to do, and the government had to intervene there. They have gone bust, and the council's been abolished, and the individuals in that council will no longer be making any of those choices or shaping what happens in Northamptonshire. So we do need to try and think what's the most effective way that we can lead to the changes that are required. I suspect the leader is right. This is going to have to rely on a change in the way that many of these services are supported and funded, and that is a government-based activity that needs to happen. The government, any government, it's not possible, any government will be reluctant to take on the level of expenditure that's implied in having to meet the level of need that's out there. So we're only going to get there when circumstances are extremely challenging. The local government conference is taking place over the last couple of days, and yesterday published a report that said a third of all first-tier councils, which includes Merton, are predicting that they will run out of money over the next 3 years. We're outside of that group, and we think our funding goes slightly beyond there. But that's the scale of problem that the government can have to look at. We're not just shroud waving, they're saying Northamptonshire has already fallen over. There are a couple of other councils I know are on candidate support at the moment. So we're going to have to use that and use all the powers that we have, both as an individual council and collectively, to try and get the changes necessary, because the needs which you're highlighting are real, and I'm sure generations to come will look back and say, how on earth could you have behaved in the way you did behave? It's not acceptable.
We'll take questions from Ben and then from Natasha, and then I think we have to bring the session to a close. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Bring it slightly into focus on a theme I've heard tonight in terms of communications and bringing residents with us. We've heard in terms of planning decisions, perhaps future is a good example of how we could communicate in the future, but in terms of the voluntary organisations, in terms of the council being a hub of knowledge for that and directing people. My question is basically, what would an efficient, modern communication strategy and system look like for you? How far away are we from that? And perhaps then Jed can come in with what's the possible end of that picture.
Could I just start on that as the leader that has some a background in communications and public relations, and it is our intention, and we've kicked off the process to put together the customer engagement with the communications engagement, so that we don't have a communications department and a customer care department, actually the two join together. So that's what we're moving towards, and the hope is that whatever the communications message that goes out is interlinked with the 200,000 residents of the borough. So there's an eye to who is the customer here, how do they get this news as well, and it's not just for Radio Jackie or for the Wimbledon Times. So it's bringing together customer relations with the communications message.
Our resources are very thin on the ground at the moment, because most of the people who would have done this sort of activity in the past, who've got rid of their posts, it's entirely discretionary spend, and we pretty much don't have to really spend money on things which we have a statutory responsibility to provide. If there was a will and we had a clear message and we wished to engage, we would probably have to find some additional resource for it. We have another slight disadvantage in Merton in that we've also transferred our housing stock. So if you're a housing provider, usually included in your housing department, there's a set of engagement with people on the estate or communities there. So you have a core of officers who you can also use to carry out some of this work. We don't have that as a group of people that we could also we'd have to think how we go around that. That said, our knowledge of how well you use social media is pretty poor as a council. And there's lots of examples that actually, if you're nimble and you know what you're doing with social media, you can actually contact lots of people without a huge amount of resource. You just need to know effectively how to use that. So if we want to get smarter about it, we'll study more clearly. I suspect there's scope for us to do a lot more than we're currently doing. For not a huge amount of expenditure.
I just wanted to follow up on that in terms of, specifically on the social media point, where you see the future of My Merton being in that picture. I know that there's a lot of elderly residents that do rely on those types of communications going forward, but there's a lot of people that will never rely on that as their first and primary. I don't know how you see the balance of perhaps that lessening in importance in the future and other streams coming in terms of using that resource.
So my personal view is that a written communication to our residents 4 times a year is actually necessary. There are lots of people who aren't digitally connected, but also I think it sort of just communicates something about an organisation that relying solely on electronic communication doesn't. That may change over time, but I don't think we're at that stage yet. That's not to say that you would have a paid communication sent out every fortnight, which some councils used to do. But it's necessary, but it clearly isn't sufficient. We need to supplement it with a sophisticated but not expensive social media system.
I think we are still mindful that My Merton is read. The annual residence survey quite clearly shows that it's up there. Some years ago, the local Wimbledon Guardian, Mitchell and Morden Guardian, were widely read. As we all know, regional newspapers are under immense pressure. They've been having to cut back, and hours refers to stories in Twickenham, in Richmond, and so on. So we always take a view of My Merton every year. Is it read? Is it not read? Is it value for money? Is it not? And at this moment in time, we do feel that it is value for money, and that it is widely read at this moment in time.
Natasha.
Thank you. Just kind of briefly going back to housing. I know that we've obviously got a great kind of programme of regeneration for Clarion who are replacing the stock that needs to be replaced. My question is though, how do we increase the supply of social housing? Not just replace it, but increase it. Because we all know, I mean, later on in this report is sort of a healthy place and the importance of having a stable home in a time where, you know, it's actually, there are people who it's inappropriate for them to be in the private rented sector and they're stuck in that cycle. There's a report today about elderly residents being stuck in the cycle of private rented accommodation. It's completely inappropriate for them. How are we going to challenge Clarion or other housing associations that we could possibly work with to deliver on that? And if they don't deliver on that, then is there a way of us doing it ourselves?
I think we have a great opportunity in terms of social housing with the Morden town centre development. There's a real opportunity for us to see 50%, to see us going with the Mayor of London's target. So there's a real opportunity there. And we also need to engage with Clarion, but also we have LNQ here, we have Modes, we have Wandle, we have a number of housing associations. And it may be that it's time to have a summit of all housing associations that are involved in the London Borough to bring them all together. Sometimes when you bring these organisations together, they don't like to speak frankly, perhaps because they're competitors. But if we can have a kind of get together to see, so that they're fully up to speed about our ambitions for social housing. As has been said, in 2010 this borough transferred its housing stock. We have to be completely and utterly honest, that was supported by all the parties, signed off by all the parties here. We're one of the few councils in London with that transfer. Whether that is right or wrong, that is the case here. So it does behold us as councillor, I as I said, to engage in a bigger way with those housing associations. And we do that. We believe that the investment by Clarion in the three estate regenerations will be good, but we do need to keep on top.
As a country, we don't know how to meet the affordable housing need that exists currently, and it's generally accepted now that our current model isn't working. The current model assumes that housing associations will be the main driver of affordable housing, and that they'll be able to do that by intensifying developments on their land holdings, selling off a percentage of them, and from the profits generated from the sales, they'll be able to generate enough affordable housing units to meet what's required. That's simply not happening. I was being briefed by some of the local authority chief executives in London who are slightly further ahead with their developments than we are. And what the housing associations are now finding is they're struggling to sell some of the units that they're producing. So you're not getting the motors in the drive the rest of the time. In some places, some councils are acquiring some of those units, but they can only buy a small percentage of them. Part of the problem is the sums we talk about here are huge. If you look at an average cost currently for a property in London to acquire the land, build it, and then sell it and make a reasonable profit, you're around about £400,000 a unit now. So even if we spend £100 million, we'd barely be scratching the surface, and you'd just be Merton, and we're not getting that. Other authorities in exactly the same position. So that model of how we're going to get it through this whole country just is not functioning. And the government is aware of that. They're trying to work out what they can do to make it work. But it's essentially a model that says we will find some market mechanism which will do this. There has to be a question mark about whether the market can ever meet the scale of demand that we've got, or whether we have to move over to a direct social provision. But we're talking about very large scale costs. We do go back into a municipalisation and not to create units. I'm not sure anybody is currently arguing for that on the scale that we necessarily need that really exists, but that's where we are.
well, I think this has been a wide-ranging and pretty frank discussion, actually. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Jim, for getting us that time. It's been valuable, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, carrying on with our formal agenda, we're going to look next at the Merton Partnership Annual Report. That's on page 7. When I met with John the other day, he was complaining he always feels a bit of an anti-climax.
It's not my first line.
Sorry. All right. Okay, John, carry on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for having me. As I say, it is quite a difficult act to follow. I've done this is my 3rd year, and I've followed Jason League. It's really difficult. Anyway, if you'll indulge me slightly, just in terms of some background on why I'm here, I suppose. Partnership working, I think, is something which is very important to Merton. It's something which is kind of in our DNA as a council. We've won awards for it. Inspections cite it as something that we're really good at. We've just carried out an internal review, and again, partners are very positive about the way that we work with them. The police, the fire brigade, the voluntary sector, we're quite different to many other local boroughs in that respect, and a lot easier for our partners to work with. But the Merton Partnership, I suppose there has to be some kind of bureaucracy, some framework behind it, and that is the Merton Partnership and me, I suppose. The partnership, we've got 4 thematic networks: children and young people, health and well-being, safer, stronger, sustainable communities and transport. And there are regular quarterly meetings of all 4. They just provide a space for partners to come together to discuss issues of kind of mutual interest and to agree how to work together. They are not decision-making forums, but they do influence priorities, prioritisation, and how work is taken forward. By partnerships and partners, I suppose, I mean the statutory bodies that we work with, the CCG, the NHS, the police, the DWP, also the voluntary sector. We've got a massive voluntary sector in Merton, very lucky to have it. But that's a very important relationship. But also the business sector, we are blessed to have a very vibrant chamber of commerce. It's the best that I've come across. So, but the partnership bodies provide that economic kind of forum for those people to come together and engage kind of 4 times a year. Many local authorities have actually done away with their thematic networks. We've made the decision, I suppose that's a political decision, that we will continue to have them. Because they're influential, and because a lot of them take place behind closed doors, then scrutiny of those and oversight is a key facet, and that was a decision taken quite a few years ago to make sure that there was an annual report, which is what's before you tonight. It's a draft report, it doesn't go anywhere until you've seen it. We also have a performance framework that we look at in terms of how we're doing collectively in terms of the borough. 2019 is a particularly important year for the partnership. There are 4, it is the first time in my local government career that I've seen 4 strategic plans coming together at the same time. So the children and young people's plan, the health and wellbeing strategy, the local plan, the sustainable communities plan, and then there's a safer, stronger strategic assessment, which happens every year. They're all being renewed at the same time. We've also got a new crop of community representatives, so MPSC have organised elections to the various boards, so we've got about 17 new reps, and we're working on a new sustainable communities plan, which is our kind of community plan, and the focus of that is going to be around social capital. Some of the things that Jed mentioned around the role of ward councillors, it's quite clear that areas with strong social capital tend to be areas that have very active ward councillors, and areas of strong social capital tend to have better outcomes. Generally, there is a strong correlation between poor outcomes in terms of poor health, crime, worklessness, with areas with low social capital. That's areas where there are very weak links between society and those areas. We will be coming to a venue near you soon to present our findings in terms of social capital and kind of measures that kind of we've been running ward by ward. So we're going to have an event and invite you to a launch of that. So just in terms of, that's a kind of background why the annual review is before you. I'm just going to say from my point of view, my team provides a secretariat for the Merton Partnership Executive Board. So the Executive Board oversees the thematic networks and is all the executives of the kind of key statutory and voluntary bodies in Merton. The annual review is collated, it's not written by me, it's collated from a number of different sources. My team doesn't provide the secretariat for the thematic networks, nor do I attend the thematic networks. So what I'm building up to say, as Councillor Southgate knows well, that I will try and answer questions, but it's extensive. It's across everything that the Council and Partners does, so I will try my best, but I think I'm going to let you down in some areas. But I'm quite happy to take away questions, and Julia and I will research and come back, which is what we've done in kind of previous years, if I'm going to struggle. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Natasha, and then let's take it.
Hi, thank you. Again, I don't need to be the person that just talks about houses. For the sustainable communities part of this report, I noticed that there isn't, as much as there's a really amazing outcomes in terms of employment and what we're doing to get young people into work, it seems really quite amazing stuff. But there's no mention of housing, and part of the terms of reference seems to be, it says the board seeks to improve the condition and supply of housing, including affordable housing. So I was wondering why there were no mention of the outcomes and focus of that in this report, and then also why it's not then one of your priorities for 2019 and 2020, when you've got volunteering and climate change as two, obviously very important. But again, given that's part of the remit of this report, why is that not focused there? And also, when they say affordable how? Like, affordable for who? At which point? Are we talking social rent? Are we talking affordable 80% of market value rent? That's a bit of clarity on that would be great. Thanks.
So, yeah, I'm going to slightly struggle on that one because I will have to go back to them. I do know that they choose their priorities each year. They obviously do a lot of work across a lot of different areas, but choose a number of different priorities. I know that they picked on 4, and that they will pick on a different number. As I say, they've got 2 next year on volunteering and climate change. Yeah, so, and that's, I suppose, it's just that they have to focus somewhere. It doesn't mean that housing is not a priority for them. Kind of my guess is that work goes on that. I do think it seemed odd that we didn't have more on housing. So I can go. I think that their section. I spoke to kind of my contact in Future Merton, and I think that they plan to include more in the final published version. They weren't able to get all of their reports all together for this meeting. So I can take that away, but I can get that section strengthened, I think, to include that, and we can circulate that around, because there is a lot going on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Use mic, please.
Thank you, Jeff. This is a very important document. It sets out the priorities on the 4 major strategic needs for us as a local authority: health, children, persons, sustainable communities, and safety, and that type of thing. And the general objective is drafted as social capital. Social capital is great because it's connectedness, but I think I echo exactly what we just heard Councillor Tasharine say, which is there's a lot of stuff which is missing from here. And what, when we hear about the issues of the day to day, like everybody needs more housing and more affordable housing, when that is such an issue which is such priority, to have it missing as an objective from this, just said, what value is this report in any way whatsoever? And the lead officer I said on the agenda that he's responsible for it, lead member, council leader, I thought he was going to be here for it, but he's actually surprised he wasn't. This is such an important issue. So on those key strategic, it's very, very light indeed. It doesn't say, it just says the two words, air quality. And that means this local authority doesn't need to have any objectives such as let's improve air quality where it's around 40 micrograms per cubic metre, get it under there for our residents. It just has nothing on that whatsoever. And that gives a green light to us in 12 months' time to come back and say, oh, we've done this or that, we've done 5 different reports, there's no change, all our streets are still at 40, micrograms a cubic metre.
There's an annex to this which is all about KPIs and missing targets and stuff. You know what I mean?
If you hang on, if you read those annexes in detail, you'll see that it's very, very light on actually the objectives for the next year. So I would expect to see something on affordable housing, saying here's an objective, how we're going to work, here's how we're going to build our vibrant town economies over the next 12 to 24 months as a priority in Morden, like we heard tonight from Councillor McLeod, in Mitcham, and create a better transport link to Mitcham, which will develop that as an economy. Here's how we're going to develop a better, more vibrant town centre, which is absolutely key to sustainable communities, to economic development. And on children and young persons, not just saying, here's our objective, and if you read it, and what these metrics are, Councillor Pritchard just mentioned, you read it, it actually doesn't say anything, it just says, this is what we've done last year, we did a survey and we drafted a plan. That's all it says in the objective, and it's a real failing for this report not to pick up on that. It ought to be saying we've got 5 schools which are not at the level of good or outstanding, and there needs to be a plan to lift those to good or outstanding. And it ought to say, for example, in children and young persons that we've got early years, key stage 1, key stage 2, where in writing and mathematics we are below the rest of London, and on A-level post-16 as well, a long way below London. It ought to recognise that and say our objective is to make us as good as, if not better than the rest of London as an average. So what I would see is the key objectives on these essential core components of local authority service. They're just not mentioned in terms of proper objective and how we're going to get there. It's missing, and the fact that the leader just walked out when he's meant to be responsible for these, I find very surprising. And if they think they've got sufficient objectives, when just as from Councillor Ryan, it's totally missing on affordable housing, I would be surprised.
I think there's different things.
Yeah.
I think different things.
Let me ask John whether you want or expect the partnership report to go into that level of targeting, because I'm sure as anything that Rachel Ward, Director of Children's Schools and Families, is only focused on the 5 primary schools that are giving us problems, but it's not even John.
Yeah, I suppose this goes back to this is the annual report for the partnership. We try and produce a document that's relatively short. So in previous years it's been as long as 60 pages. I don't think anybody ever read the 60 pages. So we try and keep it short. And it reflects the partnership discussions. What this document is not about is it doesn't set out the key strategic plans for the council. So the areas that you've spoken about, kind of air quality, there is a very detailed air quality strategy that the council has. There is a new housing strategy underway at the moment, being led by Hannah Dooley, the Director of Community and Housing. There is a new children and young people's plan where the much more granular detail of what the priorities are and what the targets are will be set out in those. But those are big documents, and they need to be scrutinised. I'm sure that they'll come here, they'll go to Cabinet. But this document, you could pick holes in it because it's so broad. But it just gives a glimpse into the partnership working. So I think it's more of the detail is actually in the council's main strategic plans rather than here.
Natasha, you wanted to comment here?
Sorry, Ed, I need to pick you up on the point that you said about us being below with the children's early years key stage 1. Was it that figure? Because when that came to CYP last year, it was 0.5%, which if anybody is rounding up in mathematical terms, it's actually we're bang on target. So I'm just, we need to be careful not to kind of to unpick the hard work of those people, because they're obviously moving in the right direction. And I wouldn't say that this report is completely useless. I was just making the point that if housing is an important thing for the borough, I would like to see it as something on your to-do list. Sorry.
Let me ask Owen. I mean, I think we can possibly disagree on the degree of targeting we're looking for here, but Owen, come on.
He just doesn't want to target. I think
No,
I
I
prefer
do.
to have a nice target.
I have a target, and indeed,
And deliver it.
and sustainable, for those, and it's about a public record, other immediately sustainable communities, I talked about increasing KPIs and making sure that they were in line with the ones that were done on LG Connect and LG Connect Plus, which if you want to look for numeric data, I suggest you go on, because there's a whole world of it there. I think you're criticising an apple for not being an orange here. Right, there is loads of data, right, there are loads of targets. I'm all for targets. Indeed, I run a campaign for child poverty targets, funny enough, which the Tory government scrapped. I'm all for it, but this isn't the document for it, is all I'm saying, right? Having a go job for this document is not right. We have got the document. If you want to bring it to this committee in the work, we should, absolutely. We've done it through the Financial Task Group, we've done it through this committee last year. This isn't the document for it.
It defines how we work with our agency. If you've got a good target, just put it in here and tell everybody.
This is about covering over. You can't have everything in everything, mate. Everything is interconnected, everything is a system. You can't talk about everything in everything. This has a very specific purpose, which is to outline the partnerships and what the partnership is trying to do, the strategies and the numeric data. The targets exist. When they're missed, they're highlighted. This isn't the document, Carl.
And it doesn't mention affordable housing once, despite the biggest issue in
I'm not going to go with that. No, yeah, happy with that. Yeah.
Strategy and objectives proper.
Okay,
Can I just come back on one thing, Dan?
let's hit on it.
So just in terms of, so I've taken that away, and I'll go back. I have said that section's in draft. I think it needs more work, personally, but I will take that back. Just in terms of the targets issue, obviously the Merton Partnership has got about 30 targets. The council collectively has like 200 service targets, which are reported on. That's my team does that. We have another 40 corporate indicators. So we're definitely not short of targets. We're not short of targets across all of the areas that we've discussed here, and those come up in the business plan, which comes here as well. So we should come back in the autumn and February with the outturns, but masses of things, including affordable housing and all of those things.
Well, let's hear from Helen.
Thank you. I found it a very encouraging report, and found in it that thread of resilience that we were talking about earlier through a lot of experience. I think that building on that would take us to a good level of social cohesion and resilience within our communities. There were two specific parts of it that I wanted to know a bit more about. The first one was the social prescribing, and what kind of detail that went into what kind of services were envisaged by that social prescribing. I would be really interested to see the results of that pupil survey, to see what the children said about whatever it was they were asked about in the survey. So what were they asked, and all of those things as well.
So on the children's survey, that I think that they've been overwhelmed with responses from the children's survey. I don't know what that stage that's reached in terms of whether that's been published yet, and it's formed the basis for the evidence for the children and young people's plan. Certainly the research that I spoke to you about in terms of social capital, we'd be able to get a view of social capital by ward for young people as well as adults. So, and it varies. There's some unsurprisingly, some wards where adults quite think there's high levels of social capital, and children and young people think the opposite. It is really interesting, but I can find out when that information will be published. I know, having spoken to Rachel that actually what it does show is that young people, in terms of social capital, they care very much about the area that they live in, their family and friends, and that their connection to their local community is part of, in terms of their well-being, is one of the strongest things for them. And also, their levels of volunteering are twice as high as adults. So the amount they care is up near 50%. And so their degree of willingness to participate is very strong indeed. Just again, to go back to social capital, I think that what we've seen is that social capital does vary by ward. That there are some wards that you think are actually got really high levels of deprivation, and you think to yourself, well, it's going to have really low kind of social capital. They don't. There's connections because there are people and there are institutions there that drive this kind of social cohesion. There are some wards where outcomes are very strong in terms of health and well-being, but actually kind of social capital is very low, and actually the connectedness and trust between different communities is low. And it shows to me that it's not easy to increase social capital, and it does require hard work to do it, but it does show that you can influence it. There are things because of those differences you can do something about it. And I suppose that's what we're hoping to achieve with the Sustainable Communities Plan, is to make that kind of rallying call for everybody to participate in that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. On that particular point, would it be something you could share with this committee, where the wards where it's working, where it's not? I think that would be very useful, hugely useful. I think it would be wonderfully transparent. We don't need to, to issue press releases, but that sort of information would help councillors, would help wards, or would help focus minds. Do you see a problem? You look like you're not happy about that.
Do I?
Yeah, sorry. I'm not going to read you. Sorry.
No. I suppose it's kind of what I mentioned before. We are planning to share the research with councillors because of the fact that there's a correlation between active ward councillors and social capital and kind of social cohesion. So we're quite keen to share the research. It goes back in part to what Jed was talking about in terms of the role of councillors. If there is an appetite, that councillors do provide a bridge between communities and institutions. So, and the best kind of ward councillors really know their patch. They know who to contact within the structures. They know who to contact within the kind of voluntary sector, and they can be quite a driver of community cohesion. So, it's something that we're happy to share. We're just not ready to share yet. It's kind of not finalised, but we're taking it through the kind of process now, and we do hope to share it in the late summer, autumn, and will do.
And one broader question. I don't agree with Ed's point about wanting targets in this. There's obviously lots of stuff going on. There's lots of partnerships which are, things are happening. And yet, I feel that amongst the community, there's this divide in the council and the community. Despite all of this, and Jed made some sort of passing reference to it, I think, in one of his answers, the community doesn't feel as involved as it should do. Do you see that as an issue, and do you see what the solution might be? Can you offer any ideas about why we might we've got to bring the community into the issues, see what the compromises we will all have to address where we want to go with things, and that divide is still there in my mind, despite the partnership.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that analysis. I think that that there's a lot going on, but a lot of people aren't actually aware of what's happening. And I suppose that's one of the things that we would like to use the community plan to help to tackle that. So in terms of trying to say to people, well, these are the priorities for the Merton Partnership, what ideas do you have for increasing kind of social capital? So how might that kind of help things like loneliness, and how might that help in terms of diabetes and people looking after themselves? And I think a lot of that is to do with kind of social infrastructure, things like libraries, tenants' halls, and places like that. And it's a kind of what they call kind of bridging kind of social capital. It is things that bring people together, sports fields, parks, and so on. I don't think it really isn't easy, and no one local authority has cracked it. I think that you kind of ignore it at your peril. We looked at a piece of research that we did in the Helly Awards with Sutton. It showed we were worried that there was low social capital and that there were community tensions there. What we found is that there weren't really community tensions there. There was a disaffected group of kind of residents who felt as though things had not turned out for them as they wanted, I think. But what we did find more than anything was that there were a lot of people that really liked living in the area. They wanted to get involved, but they didn't know how to get involved. And that was part of the work we did too, kind of community voluntary service councils, to try and get people more linked together. Because when you do get people coming together, it's often the case that they tell people, oh, don't you know about that after school club, or don't you know about X, Y and Z, or didn't you know about the shortcut through the park? No, they didn't. But as soon as you get people talking, you do get that kind of transference of ideas, but that can't all come from the council. Indeed, it can't come from the council, but the council has quite a few levers with its partners to encourage things like that. So I think we're about to start on a journey with the State Communities Plan. I think it's involved for lots of different groups in that.
And using councillors as part of that, as Jed mentioned, would be terribly useful. I think we've got to find different ways of getting civic pride again. Not just sitting there blaming X or Y for the problems we're all confronting.
Well, thanks for making good.
No, I think that social cohesion is sort of fair and square within our remit, so we absolutely are interested and do need to hear more about this as the community plan develops.
It's coming back here, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. So, John, thank you. It's a good session. And now we go on to the annual member scrutiny survey on page 35. I'm going to introduce this. What I'm going to say is it's a bit of a rude awakening, but I think we're prepared to face up to that. We are undertaking quite a comprehensive review of the way we do scrutiny right now with the help of Ed Hammond from CFPS, and in that also we will take on board the new statutory guidance on scrutiny. I've got a briefing on that tomorrow morning, actually. So yes, we some things are good, but we're not perfect, and we aim to improve. Does that disarm you?
I think there's a lot in here, and I had this conversation. I forgot the gentleman's name. Is it Ed?
Yeah.
And right now, and I probably have a lot of sympathy with people from different parties actually in this, is that they think that scrutiny is not working. Actually, I think it's more systemic than that, is that people want too many things out of motions forward and then get refused or whatever. They want to actually do scrutiny, they want to do policy development, and all those things don't fit into this small little vehicle that we have. And I think that's one of the fundamental issues that we have with scrutiny at the moment, is lots of different people want lots of different things, as well as that it's under-resourced, and there is no other forum for policy development, where if Paul wanted to, volunteer a view to someone on the best way that they do X, there's another forum for it. And the council is a set piece. So it feels slightly as if we can rearrange how we do scrutiny as much as we want, but unless there's something else as well next to it to complement it, we're not going to get there. Because we will always have this butting of heads between political point soaring and platforming, and actual scrutinising, and actually, have we thought of X? You know what I mean? Those three things that we all want to do. And I think there's only so much you can do in that area. I think that point made, there is one point on detail, which is to do with on question 9, which is there needs to be an overhaul of the appointments, the way things to be done in line with Parliament. Just to be clear, the parliamentary system is actually not that dissimilar to the one that we actually use now, where chairs are apportioned by parties and numbers are apportioned by parties. The only difference is that the chairs are, and individual members are voted by their own parties. But the only difference being in Parliament is that the chair is voted for by all parties. Only after it's agreed which party it comes from. I'm just saying, yeah, it's just point to clarify, you know what I mean, that if people want to go in that direction, that's up for a bunch of people to discuss, but I just want to clarify what that parliamentary model is that that's all it is.
On that point, no one doubts that. You know, there are statutory requirements, but there must be the majority. The majority of parties have the majority of members on the scrutiny panels as well. So all of that is absolutely accepted. It's the idea of a secret ballot. That's the issue of who's elected, who from that party is elected. We do well.
Just to be absolutely clear, we 100% we have a secret ballot for chairs, and we have a secret ballot for members. And trust me when I say there were tears before bedtime at the last group when all of this was decided. 100%, mate. We have a secret ballot, and people didn't think, who thought they were getting things, didn't get things. Right? So
well, I hear what you said. We'll discuss that outside of this. There's conversation.
I'm being 100% honest. Absolutely. The only difference is in like I say, in Parliament is that the chair, you'd get a vote in who's the chair, even if it's a Labour seat, right? Is for the chairs of the committees, so that the chairs have a cross-party appeal, as opposed to where it is now, we decide on. That's the only difference. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, and you know me well enough, is that when we did that anonymously, and there were tears before bedtime that people didn't get what they thought they were going to get. So it isn't the stitch-up that, funny enough, no one run for pensions because you don't get paid as chair pensions, oddly enough. No one run against me, but so that was probably the only one that was a done deal.
Don't get a pension anymore.
Just on this point of detail. So that you're telling me that for all the other scrutiny committees,
chairs,
there's a competition of people wanting them.
Yeah.
We do.
I think
I'm
trying to think if anyone stood. And I'm being absolutely honest. I think there was one that someone didn't stand. I'll happily talk about mine, right? But no one stood against me for that reason. But and I'm not sure if anyone stood against Peter. I think everyone else. I think they're all.
And for most committees, there were more people applying for them
than got them. And then for all the other little things on the margins, that aren't they were competed for everything from LJ rep, and it was all done by secret ballot. And I could make.
Seriously.
It's for a very long meeting.
There is no.
All I'd say is I've been asking that question of Labour members for a year now.
I'm sorry.
And never had that answer.
You asked me just about everything else.
I was in a Christmas party. You didn't know which. Oh well.
Or Christmas party.
We'll talk about it later.
Can I just add, when we had the new councillors in 218, we were asked, for the benefit of new councillors, all of us who wanted to stand for chair, to give a 2-minute talk. That was timed and shut off before the vote, because the first time there were 3 standing for the chair I got, and we each had to do a presentation. 2 minutes talk. We didn't do an issue because we were more than.
Because we can go on and run around on this, but thank you for that, sir. Yeah.
Maybe I could just throw a question to the other members, which is how would you feel about changing the rules of our scrutiny process so that the minority parties were able to chair some of the groups? Because that would give, the whole point of scrutiny is to ask a difficult question, and I think the frustration, the reason why the satisfaction levels have dropped is because people feel they are being shut out of the process if you're not a member of the cabinet or you're not in the elected administration. So what we're seeing is, we're asked to speak at scrutiny panels, we've been told no, we're not allowed to speak as elected members. We've asked for things to be on the agenda, and everyone sat around in a meeting, put hands up and asked to go on the agenda, and then we find out, just like that, exactly, not allowed to speak. When you face a difficult question, you're drowned out by the elected majority, and that's exactly why people are disappointed with scrutiny. So, if you ask, we've had experiences where things have been voted, put on the agenda, and then when you see the next meeting, they're just somehow magically dropped off because you feel the debate's being shut out a little bit. So, I would suggest that we consider allowing minority groups, the other political parties, like they're doing in the House of Commons, which Councillor Pritchard keeps speaking about, chair some of those committees, and also, just like we've got a rule that 3 councillors can call in a cabinet decision, how about we extend that 3 councillor rule so that if we want to have a topic to be discussed in scrutiny, we're not dependent on it being supported by the majority or voted down. But 3 councillors, any councillor of any party can get together and say, I'd like a policy review, just like we can call in a decision of the cabinet, we'd like a quick policy review, maybe a mini report or something like that. And what do the other councillors think about having that as a fair and equitable solution to better balance the scrutiny process?
I think it's nonsense, then.
No, I
just told you that's a difficult question. I'll give you a clear answer. I think what you've suggested is absolute nonsense.
That opens it right up, and I don't think we've got time tonight, I'm afraid, but certainly the election rather than the nomination of chairs, yes, is the way it operated while it was a hung council, actually. What I'd like to... Can I point you to page 51, which has a list of action points, so that we get a little bit of focus here. See if you've got any comment there. And point 5 is that we will consider whether scrutiny chairs should be allocated, appointed, or elected. So that's to come once we get the feedback report back from Ed Hammond, actually from Centre for Public Scrutiny.
I'll go back to my open point here, is that we need something complementary. Is that I really do think that one of the areas for that we're not achieving the kind of, and I actually agree with Paul that there's lots of stuff which is just technical, the right way to do things, you know what I mean, and we can actually have conversations about, but there isn't a vehicle for that, and there isn't the space for that, and that kind of takes longer as well, perhaps sometimes, and is, it's a very different process. We try to do too many things. We try to do the political point scoring, we try to do the scrutiny, we try to do the policy development for those who don't have a voice. And I actually, whilst I'm opposed to everything Ed just said, both in substance and spirit, when it comes to developing the good policy, I think that voice is important. So I think there's something missing here, which is about a complementary, taking some of the pressure off the scrutiny by having a complementary vehicle. I don't know what it is, but I think it's worth looking at.
Ed. I'm sorry, Ben.
Same hairstyle. What I would say is, I would say, sorry, I would agree that there needs to be something complementary, but what I saw in the survey results there that people thought task groups worked quite well, and that is a vehicle that people really appreciate in terms of talking about policy in detail. Maybe there's a mid-ground where you'd be able to tackle a few more policies at the same time. That's what's kind of reaching out from the reports to me as well.
Natasha?
I would just to say about councillors speaking at meetings, do you mean people who aren't on the panel applying to speak? Do you mean things like that? Yeah. But I've been a chair for literally 5 seconds, but I want to prioritise the voice of residents actually, and yes, they can speak through councillors, but if a resident asks to speak at a meeting, I would rather prioritise them than give space for a councillor, because you have members on the panel that you, whether we have to tighten up that process and how that works, I don't know, but you have members on the panel that should be able to relay things that you talk to them about. I don't know the internal workings, but also, yes, task groups are better for driving specific policy points and issues, because the politics isn't there. Everybody's just talking and there's no grandstanding, there's no issue, because you're just there to look at a specific thing and have a discussion and find the best possible way to get stuff done. And I think that's why everybody likes them, because it takes the pressure off. You just get on with the job, and if there's a way of broadening that out somehow, that would, I think, be very, very helpful.
I think
What I was going to say, before we got sidetracked by that very interesting diversion, which we'll explore a bit later, it requires all of us to change if we get scrutiny working properly. It requires the opposition to play a different role and the governing party to play a different role, where we act to work together to scrutinise issues. The grandstanding happens, and it's wrong. It happens because that's what the opposition can do at the moment. So the system as it is produces that conflict. The issue is always sitting in party groups. It's a classic example of where we go into our silos. Sorry, I pushed in here earlier. So that's one thing. So we all have to learn. We all have to learn to use scrutiny differently. I'm not just pointing the finger at the governing party. That's an important point. And secondly, we must be transparent. It's wonderful to hear about the secret ballot. Wonderful. But you've heard me in council speech after council speech attack the leader for having too much power. No one said to me, "Oh, we'll put a secret ballot." But anyway, that's something we'll explore later.
I never realised that's where you were going at.
I
genuinely never realised that's what you were. I agreed with the spirit of what you said. I never realised that was the substance of what you were saying.
Okay. I think I need to keep things moving along, but we will be coming back to this. And I think discussion this evening has suggested to me we can, in fact, leave the politics or the party politics to one side when we're focusing in on things, but hey, I'm naive. Good. Can we move on to the task group report on road safety around schools? And Helen has chaired this. It's on page 53. Anybody else sit on that apart from me? No. Helen, is this going to be your last meeting for us as well? Yes. So I would like to thank you for all you have done over quite a long time now. Yeah. So yes, please do.
You're not going to miss it, are you?
I will miss it terribly. There was a self-contained double unit, I think, in this report. We looked at ways that we could improve the school journey.
Sorry, Chair, could I just ask you to lean in or bring the mic
Sorry,
nearer?
yeah,
Because
if
if
bring
it's
the
a
mic a bit nearer.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's a self-contained report. We looked at the ways to improve the school journey for children. We kept in mind the wider policy context. Looked at examples of good practice in other authorities. And we also called widely for evidence. We had a public meeting here, which was well attended. We heard from local residents, parents, schools and officers. All of our evidence is summarised in the appendices. Our recommendations are set out here, and we'd like the Commission to endorse and approve forwarding the report to Cabinet for consideration. Questions? Well, Peter and I were both there, and Julia, so in between us, we can answer any questions.
Recommendations on pages 60, 61, and 62. They have been actually discussed with officers, so we know they are sensible and viable. Ed?
Yeah, so all the recommendations look really sensible. Thank you for them. Are you able to say something about what the STARS programme is? Because we go straight into STARS this, STARS that, and it appears throughout the report. And of course, you all know because you've been on the task group, but for those who weren't on it, it may be useful to say something about what the STARS actually is. Thank you.
Well, in fact, it was one of the questions that I kept asking officers because I hadn't seen a school transport plan. So it's the incentives within the school transport plan to achieve certain objectives. So it's quite broadly written, but they're what you need to achieve within a certain school year in order to achieve different gold, bronze or silver status within your school travel plan. So keeping up to date and keeping training going.
Thank you. This was really interesting and really detailed, and it's good to read so many sort of detailed and logical recommendations. One thing that worries me is this push towards getting more people to come to school via cycles, which sounds great and brilliant, but given that our cycle infrastructure is so poor in the borough, I worry it will in fact have the opposite effect unless we also at the same tandem also address the problem we have with cycle paths, etc. Did the committee get that far, or was that seen beyond its remit?
It wasn't within our original remit, but I think it was brought into it, wasn't it? Well, it was a safer cycling as part of it, but it certainly wasn't a main driver. It was more about walking to school, really. I think safer cycling is a different issue that does need to be addressed. Although within the education programmes offered by the council to schools, there are cycling programmes, so those still exist, but no, we didn't really. It was beyond our remit with the cycle lanes.
And for the primaries, it does tend to be walking, scooting. So,
yeah. There are various references to cycling.
Yeah. Yes, there are. So.
Thank you, Chair. Helen, can I say thank you very much for a very detailed and obviously hard-worked report. I'm very impressed with it, and I think there's so much good in it. They did have a long time ago in Merton, the walking to school with Julia, was it Deborah Sedra? Something like that, and you'd go around the schools, and they got a monthly foot, and I've still got some of them at home, that the children got, and they loved collecting them, a different colour each month. So there has been a big drive, and then that seemed to fall off. Now, there's a lot of talk about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and I was at a neighbourhood watch meeting where the police said, because it comes up somewhere, and I can't quote you, but I know I'm looking at page 75, it's not enforceable. So the police told me this, it's not enforceable. So if it isn't, what's the point of having it? I'm not against it. But as everyone knows, I walk my daughter's dog a lot. And talking to someone who works in Westminster Council, said in Westminster they have virtual speed humps, which are flat, but they look, well, you know the virtual, and as you get closer, they look higher and higher. So your brain, even if you think, I know it's flat, your brain, and I wondered if anything of that had been looked at, because the humps we have, I know I get a lot of complaints where buses and lorries go, the vibrations on houses, the noise, then they break up and need repair, and they've been removing some of them. So I don't know if, like Ed, I wasn't sure what the star system was, and I appreciate that, but whether, if this 20-mile-an-hour speed limit isn't enforceable, could we look at the virtual speed humps initially around schools? Well, I don't know enough about it, but I've heard of the existence of them in Westminster.
So a virtual speed hump that continues to fool the motorist. That's fascinating, because I'm aware of one on a route as I leave Sutton towards Colston, and after driving it over once, you think, God, why did they put that one? So if no, you slow the first time, you just feel insulted, so after that you go over it faster.
Doesn't it get bigger as you get there, and doesn't your brain?
No, not after you've gone over
Well,
it
the
once.
Westminster person
assured
me it's being very successful in Westminster, so I'm open on that.
It might be that in Westminster they have people making fewer repeat journeys
that's a good point, is where it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about the frequency and the type of traveller.
I think what's more interesting is as we move towards the borough-wide 20-mile per hour limit, I mean, it is true that the stance of the Met has always been that there are only, they will enforce the national 70-mile per hour limit and they will enforce 30, and that they do not have the resource to enforce other limits. But once this thing starts to become borough-wide and we get warning signs of more than 20, I don't know whether we as a council then would have discretion to use ANPR to enforce.
I'm not against it.
No.
Not against it,
no.
but that's what I was told by the police.
But the argument has always been about achieving a culture change rather than enforcement to get people to drop their sleeves.
I think what Mitra had said was that she was starting at the edge of the borough where it joined, so, which was already 20. So bringing it in that way, so you would have slowed down before you hit the borough boundary.
Yes.
And there's some really great guidance here, as everyone said. Will you also, or could we request that all the good guidance, or these information notes, or possible areas of best practice, which every school should put in place to reduce the number of cars used for the school run, the daily school run, will that guidance also be going out to all the private schools as well in our borough, because they obviously generate a lot of cars as well? So is that, I know it's kind of partially referenced to private schools, but will that guidance, as part of your recommendations and task groups, go to all the private schools in the borough so they all put in place the same plan?
Sorry. I don't know the answer to that question. I know that the emphasis is obviously on our schools, but if there is information there.
But we did also hear from private schools,
Yeah,
didn't we,
we
in
did
Wellington,
hear
for
from-
example.
yeah, yes.
And the other little twist here is that we did wonder whether at the moment, the allocation of parking permits to teachers, that they pay a separate fee for that, and we were wondering whether we couldn't make that conditional upon signing up for the STARS programme, actually. Is that?
Sorry, I lost you. So I was just thinking about recommendations 6 and changing the words.
I think it already is. I think that you have to have an up-to-date travel plan in order to get teacher permits.
So there's no reason why, if people want parking permits for teachers, that would apply equally to private schools as local authority supported schools, wouldn't it?
Is that a recommendation from the committee then, that because they want the borough as a whole to benefit, so if that means sharing all this great best practice which you've developed, if that goes to every school, whatever type of school, and they look at that and go, we can roll some of that stuff out, we don't have those great ideas, we don't have that level of accreditation that you're talking about, lift everybody to a similar level, and it benefits the borough as a whole, because everyone puts the best practice in place, whatever the measure. So is that something we agree with as a committee?
It does say that all schools in the borough.
Good, yeah. Do you want to clarify it? Yeah.
What I was going to suggest is we could just put all schools brackets, including private schools, so that it's really clear, because we don't normally. But because we found also, obviously, they have a larger catchment area, and so there's more cars coming into private schools, so it really is pertinent to do this. I'll find out how we do that, but if we change the recommendation, we can do that.
Okay. Any other comments on so this will now go forward to Cabinet on the 15th? Yes. You're coming along to speak to that, Helen. Thank you. Good. Yeah, and thank you for all you've done to lead on that. We have our work programme. Can I take you on to that? That's on page 89. got a few things to decide. Let's deal with the easy things, shall we? We do agree that we want to continue with the financial monitoring task group. That's item 3, and we've indeed already set up 4 meetings.
Members to it. I sort of assumed that some of the members had carried on. I just wanted, and Ed contacted me before the meeting to say that he'd like to be on it, but I don't know if there's anyone else who's not been on it who wants to be on it.
Like all task groups, it's open to everyone from all councillors.
Absolutely. Anyone who's not on cabinet.
And really, why it has worked so well is that people have joined it because they have an interest. That's the only thing. Yeah. And if you don't join it, sort of thing. But it's been self-selecting and it's been very effective. Well, it's up to members to elect the chair.
No, I was just wondering I was asking whether or not Stephen David would go for it, Stephen didn't accept it.
So, and the chair can be from any party, can't they?
Yes. Chair is selected by the task group. That's
So that's an opportunity.
Yes.
So Conservative members know to be on
Stephen Gross would definitely be interesting.
Good.
Do you know about Councillor Jimbo? He wants to carry on. Paul, do you want to carry on? And then following Labour we have just Owen.
More like Civic.
How many can be on the task group?
As many as want to join. What happens is that tomorrow we're going to send an email out to all councillors with information about each of the task groups that's been set up by each of the panels and whatever the commission sets up, with information about who's already on them and asking if other people are interested in joining. You don't have to be a member of the panel that have set up the task group in order to be on that task group.
I'll make my decision tomorrow.
I think there's something interesting on that is because there isn't a callback, right? Because there isn't the power to call in something. If you don't have the need to achieve administration majority, right? Because you know what I mean. Because it's just there purely advisory. It can't actually sort of.
All recommendations come back here to be endorsed.
But there's something interesting in that for when we talk about the overall scrutiny, the wider scrutiny issue, is the fact that that single power, in many respects, creates an obstacle because it's got to be counterbalanced. Because if there wasn't a single power, you know,
there's no requirement for proportionality, for example.
That is one of the reasons why the task groups, all task groups work differently. Might find what they need.
Peter, did you
Yes, I
want
will.
Didn't Aidan do it last time?
Yes, he doesn't want to do it again. That's okay.
So that's the FMTG result. Have a look at page 98, our work programme for the year ahead. It is. So we are adding to this the community plan in September. From what I was saying, we will be bringing the.
I thought it was November.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's what I wrote down when we met.
Yeah. No, you're right. So yeah, we'll be looking at the community plan as well. As what's detailed here. We'll see the Borough Commander twice. We have sessions with same for Merton, linked to that as well.
This is kind of linked. Is if we're going to drop, and I might be mistaken, I might be preemptive, but if we're going to drop Morden/Labour slavery, human trafficking, specifically in the supply chain, as a class group, can we not find? Because I've spoken to a couple of people, and it seems that the overwhelming thing is not commercial revenue generation. Right? So if we're going to drop, have we got any scope to look at it?
There's space in March.
So in March, and given that it's smaller, just specifically look at the education and awareness given to those council officers involved in procurement in how to identify procurement chains that have forced slavery. So not wider issues, not nail bars, but just within our own supply chain, right? And whether or not our officers, and we don't have to invent the wheel here, because there's already a number of online learning methods for people to identify what is slavery within supply chains that in public sector that exists. Whether or not those involved in procurement are educated towards that. So narrowing it down, making it tighter, but make it specific in that area.
So.
No, I agree. Yeah. So I looked into it after that first discussion.
So on page 94, well, we've put the set of options out there. You are saying it is the.
I might be preemptive, but I have a feeling that I might be right that we just go for commercialisation, revenue generation, and then maximisation.
Yeah, that's the feeling of the.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that we have, we've been over this ground before, so we need to make sure we're not simply replicating what's been done before. So.
You did state receiving, or it has been stated receiving information on what's done before.
Yeah.
It's in there.
I think that's the pre-read, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I think
That's the first.
the first bit is having a look at what exists. Second bit is having a look at what other, what we've done before as a council. Second bit is having a look at what other councils are doing. So, I don't think you can look at Kent, right? Whatever. It's one of those things that you can always look at bad practice and say that's why you shouldn't pursue practice. You know what I mean? But I've been to bad restaurants. I still go out for dinner. And what we need to find is good restaurants. Good practice. And I think it's out there. So it's finding out what the previous survey was, what good practice is for revenue generation in other areas, what our USPs are up in Morden Park, that wonderful thing that we almost looked to sell last year, whether or not we can find a strategic partner to do marriages or whatever else, or to do conferences or whatever. And I know that's kind of moving into the normal private sector, but quite frankly, it just doesn't go off. You're not competing against anyone else in this borough, because it doesn't happen, especially in this side of the borough. So if you're providing something new that could be done, fine, and that's something that we're not crowding out the local marketplace. I don't care if I'm competing with someone in Carshalton, that's not our borough, right?
Well, we're already competing with it as a wedding venue, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. So that is an issue. So it's about finding those limitations, finding good practice, and finding what our USPs are.
Yes, it's about finding balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Could I just comment, if you're thinking of looking at the Morden Park Hall, including whoever runs it, to look about how they can develop a business plan for it?
Well, that might be one of the recommendations at the end of it, is that we look at, it'd be nice to know what assets we've got, what real estate assets we've got before we sell them off, and have people look, can we do a strategic partnership there? It'd be nice to know, because there's assets that are both conceptual and services expertise that we have here. Then there's the real estate assets. Then there's the stuff that I want to repeat what I said about triggering, having that virtuous cycle. So there's a lot of different things there, and there's other councils who are doing it in a lot of different ways. What is St George's Hospital? We know again, it's not in our borough, but we know that they have lots of young workers, because it's a college hospital. There's going to be lots of young clinicians training there that need all the residents that are also key workers. you know, I know of boroughs that are built specifically, you know, that kind of key worker stuff and create revenue generation in that way, and that's different from social housing, because these are like single rooms. You know, you're not building in the same way, and you do. There are new things. There are we've just got to be imaginative, creative, and be open to get into that space in a balanced way, so that, you know, those of us who care about business also care about our local businesses, don't feel that we're crowded out all over.
Yeah.
I think we all agree with that.
Okay. So that's agreed on the last group topic.
Who would like to be on the task force?
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
Could I be a reserve if you don't get enough?
You don't have to commit tonight, really.
Because I have to list the list
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Morden House.
There's only a minimum, isn't there? There's no minimum.
There is a sort of maximum that becomes unwieldy.
But there's no minimum in this, is there?
Which is one person.
Done on your own.
No, I'm just saying. You know, I know you want
The
it
best
all.
number is, the best number is sort of 4 to 6.
Yeah,
really,
and
to
that's
make it
useful
really
to know.
work.
Yeah, great. Okay,
You're
let's check
gonna
it.
get really
I'm
I'm quite happy if you get outside this.
But I'm sure that the
Absolutely,
there
yeah,
will
it
be
will
other
be,
people who
and I
are
think
not
it's
here.
nice to
Anthony.
throw it open.
Anthony might want to do it. Because I think he's actually.
But you just get first dibs because you're members of the commission.
Well, I'm just checking back on what we need to make sure we're done. Drawing on external experts is a little difficult to the side of the study, isn't it?
Restorative justice one, Neil Thurlow, the safety Merton, he's already thinking about, you know, bringing providers along to that. So,
Okay.
you know, I think it's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Good idea.
Really good, yeah.
Good. Group. I think that's it, really. I don't know whether anybody's taken up. We suddenly were offered a lot of training, weren't we? Just as Kim Brown left.
Yeah.
I don't know whether anybody's taken any of that up. Or...
I did.
Yeah.
I did it last year. I haven't done it this year yet. What time was it?
I went to the planning committee. I thought it was for ward councillors,
So did I.
but it was all about being on the planning committee.
So they sent an email around apologising, I didn't know. There was an email that went around apologising and they were going to redo that. Something went very wrong that day.
Because there were meant to be two quite distinct sessions, weren't there? One for those
who were sitting on the panel and those who were not.
I actually attend that. It's useful. I'd like another one that will cement what I need to know. I feel as if I was hit by a planning shotgun that night.
But the training was, this is helpful and I'll take that back, but the training that's sort of within my gift here is as scrutiny members, so the sort of things that we've listed on 95 that sort of really came out of the survey.
Having been through it last year, right, you cannot offer too much training on understanding public sector finances, right?
Yeah.
But every time that I've worked in public sector finance for a number of years, and I still get confused, or things change, or it's always a challenge to stay on top of where you can add value, and you need to be reminded and refreshed what's going on.
That will happen. So Caroline Holland will provide the 2 slots that she does every year. And I go and I learn something new.
Yeah, I know.
Can I, on that point, the council paid for me to go on an LGA one-day training course, introduction to government finances. Fantastic. It's really good. It's quite nice hearing it from someone out of that and the officers who give you information. I thoroughly recommend it to you.
Oh, yeah. Can you
Can we share it at all?
I can show you the slides, and I've got the slides and all that stuff. Yeah.
Some of the learning.
Yeah.
What the complete it or
You
find
said the slides to Julia.
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
Because the other thing that, I mean, I mentioned I'll be going to the London Scrutiny Network tomorrow, which will have a session on the new statutory guidance, and that it's worth keeping an eye on the courses they run on a quarterly basis. That is an opportunity to find out what other boroughs are doing on the scrutiny fund, which is where I find it valuable.
And that scrutiny conference last year was really good in December.
Yes, there's no shortage of opportunities, it's just whether you've really got the time, and I know some of you have to work for a living too.
Yeah.
Any day now the lottery's going to come in.
So the other things that I'm sort of suggesting, I mean, a number of people were interested in something on monitoring performance and interpreted data, and I was going to sort of just talk to the chairs to see whether that's best done on a panel by panel basis or whether we should do something more general. So that I'm going to sort of email and come back to you on that. And then questioning skills, although it was well attended, the session we did, so I'm not sure how many people really want it. So what I thought is I'll actually email all the councillors and ask, do they personally want it, or do they think it's a good idea for other people? Yeah. And if they do want it, you know, exactly what they want to be delivered by that session, and then we can work out whether that's something we can do in-house or whether to bring in an external trainer for that. And then the chairing and agenda management, that is one that Kim Brown has organised as part of the wider training and development offer, and so there's something on it's happened. 2nd of July has happened.
Yes,
Did anyone go to it?
I had a separate session.
I had a separate session as well. And it's really good if sort of dependent view on the joint class. It is actually. You think it's one of those things. It's like Linda got the CV. You think, oh, it's fine. But then when you got to get taught it, it's like,
Who provided that?
Kim organised it. I can't remember. It was a woman.
So that was last year's one. It's probably the same.
Yeah, I think it's the same one.
Yeah.
I assume it's expected that all new chair will be on that. So.
No, it's not mandatory.
I
wasn't trained.
No, I was looking at you.
Well, I think it worked.
And I meet with all the new chairs as well and sort of run through things, and then we talk about what other things they could go on. I mean, everyone's got different backgrounds.
Convention or rules.
Okay, let's see with the work program. I think the last item, discussion of questions for the Borough Commander. Well, we perhaps haven't thought them out in detail, but I mean, we've touched on this before, haven't we? I said my learning point would be that we go in on the questions in the areas that we've identified as key, and I think you indicated, Paul, that how you've done it, diplomatically indicated that succinctness would be, appreciated from all parties.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, whether we decide when it comes to it, we want to have a more, I mean, in the event we did not have a pre-meet, we just discussed that we thought we knew where we were going, but if you feel you do want to say,
I think pre-meets are always good. It's good to
on it,
actually.
yeah.
What we want to avoid is that mechanically going through all the various answers to the various questions. We really want to vote for it something and discuss with each other how we're going to zero in.
Yeah.
And that will help Sally as well.
Yeah.
It will help everyone.
So perhaps we should formally timetable that and do it before the meeting. Just half an hour. Yeah.
On the day of the meeting, then, half an hour before. Is that what you're saying?
I think so, because we know everybody's going to be free that evening, whereas if you try and do it on another date, it's a bit hard to accept, especially tomorrow.
And do you still want to identify a list of questions in advance that we can send to the Borough Commander and she provides answers.
Does it need to be such a formal process?
It
I mean, we say we talk
No, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, my preference would be
to not do that.
They're all to be able to answer the questions.
I do feel if we are asking for data like, what is the size of the force currently in different parts of the borough and so on, that factual stuff, it's only fair to give.
It gives you the chance really to do second order analysis when you're looking at how many how many schools police officers get, how many people have they got on standing duty as opposed to quick reaction. You know what I mean? That you can find out, to do your second order. So I'm quite keen that we have those data
I agree. So that's a halfway house whereby we decide the 2 or 3 areas we want to drill down into, then work out the factual matrix of things we want her to provide us with, and then that gives us something. The trouble at the moment is the questions are all over the place, which most of the time go through all those various questions. If we have factual stuff in the areas we want to drill into, that strikes me as a
absolutely. We know that the big one is to do with the way that they do estate planning, because we have concerns about where the cars will be parked and all that kind of stuff, which she sold really badly in the last meeting because she put the cabin pigeons that we were worried that she was shutting down the police station, but it's actually just about the housing of these things, and most of the vehicles get towed when they're already on the streets, so it isn't a delayed response time. What would be nice though is to see the data for that this time, to know how many vehicles respond to incidents from points.
I asked that question. They don't keep that data. They will not.
No,
I asked that twice now, both times.
I did.
I find it bizarre.
In which case, is the question, what data are they basing the movement on, and how do they intend to mitigate its impact if they haven't done a quantitative study of what their impact will be? Because that gets to the core of that specific issue. Anyway,
okay. I mean, we need to do a bit of homework, don't we, before that get our questions together. And then I think once we have the data, we'll be much more. Well, we are better placed for the follow-on questions about how they're utilising that, how they're interpreting it. Yeah. Okay.
So I'll email everyone then with a deadline for getting some questions. And sorry, and just to refresh your memory, and obviously some people who are totally new, that previously the Commission decided to focus questions on the impact of the 4-borough merger on policing levels, to get the update on police estate matters following the internal review that the Borough Commander was talking about last time, and then an update on MOCAP decision making in relation to the location of the Merton front office police station. And I think that's recently started.
What are you going to do with all these extra police officers?
I don't think it was 20,000 for London.
I don't know how many have been lost in London.
I think it was 4,000, but I know that.
No,
same
it's
number now
quite
as it was
substantial.
year 2000, I think, about 31,000. It has been up in the last few years.
Okay, I think we can close there. Thank you all very much.